The Stillwater Planning Commission meeting of March 22nd will come to order. The first item on the agenda is the consent docket. Do I hear a motion to approve the consent docket or to move any items off of it?
Without objection, move to approve.
Second the motion.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent docket. We shall now vote. Motion passes 5-0. Next item will be public hearings. The process this evening will be to call for items on the agenda. The commission will hear briefly from staff first, then the applicant and/or their representative will speak. Then we'll open the public hearing and hear from those in favor and/or in opposition to the request. When you come to the podium, please clearly state your name and address for the record. Before closing the public hearing, both staff, applicant, and/or their representative will be provided an opportunity to respond and provide additional information and answer questions. After all interested parties have spoken, the public hearing will be closed, and then we will hear closing remarks from staff along with those alternatives. With that, we'll start with the first item on the agenda.
Okay. Good evening, Commissioners. Brady Moore from the City Manager's Office, here tonight to present a specific use permit at 1060 East Knotts Avenue, also identified as 801, 899, and 998 East Knotts Avenue. The applicant requests review and approval of a specific use permit to allow for a healthcare and social assistance facility at the property addressed that I just mentioned, the 1060 East Knotts Avenue. It's currently zoned RTM and multifamily residential and CS commercial shopping. All three lots, the 801, 899, and 998 East Knotts Avenue are all currently vacant. The applicant is seeking approval for this SUP before submitting development plans, although they estimate having a 36,000 square foot facility on the subject site. This area map shows the subject site in the purple hatch pattern along Knotts Avenue. You can see it sits to the east of Perkins and to the south of Lakeview. The aerial map shows the subject site again highlighted with the outlined in red. It sits there to the east, southeast of Atwood's and the Goodwill store along Knotts Avenue. Here's a street view of one of the little commercial section close to to the south of Goodwill, and then you go just further down Knotts Avenue here to the cul-de-sac where you see the RTM area that I'll highlight here in just a moment. So as I was just saying, on the zoning map you can see the hatch pattern that recognizes the subject site. The majority of it is that yellow, which is that RTM zoning, and then that little bit on the west side of the property is CS commercial shopping. As we look to the future land use map from our comprehensive plan, reason we do this is to see what we forecast for commercial growth or residential growth in different areas of the town. Here, as you can see on our C3 plan, the entire property is highlighted yellow, which is high density residential. Again, for this use of this specific use permit, it is allowed in this district. And with that, do you have any questions of staff?
Any questions from the commissioners? I don't see any. Thank you. At this time, we'd ask if the applicant would like to come forward and say a few words.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Josh Cantwell. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Grand Lake Mental Health Center. I reside in Claremore, Oklahoma. And what we're talking about today is an opportunity to expand some of the array of services that we offer in Stillwater. We're a certified community behavioral health clinic who has been in operation since the late 70s. We operate in 12 northeastern, north central counties. We've been in Stillwater since 2016. We currently serve around 1,600 individuals. That's youth and adults. We provide an array of outpatient services as well as a urgent recovery center for people that are in crisis. We're currently renting space in the Cimarron Plaza, and we're renting another facility close to the hospital on Walnut. We're looking to consolidate those locations, quit paying the rent, and build a state-of-the-art facility which will house all three of those levels of care, and at the same time look at the space around that to be able to enhance our array with some other kind of groundbreaking type services. We have a level of care called a brief stay therapeutic home, which aims at decreasing the rate at which children are removed from their homes, either to go into psychiatric hospitalization services or also going into the foster care system. And it's something that we would be interested in possibly looking at, in the future. That's not what we're talking about necessarily here today. I can answer any questions that you have. I know we gave a piece of paper that showed some of those things. We're just really excited to be here in Stillwater, be able to continue that. The access that this location would bring would be really good for the people of Stillwater also, and not to mention the parking that would be there, because it's something that we always deal with, is having enough parking in our facilities. And I take any questions.
Questions from the commissioners? I do have a couple.
Yes.
So the property that we're looking at, it is accessible by both knots, and it also has frontage on Lakeview. And I know at this time you don't really have any kind of plans, really. You're really
Yes.
kind of trying to fill the waters for the zoning. But do you have a feel of the intent, at least, for access? Would that be from Lakeview or from Knott's, or perhaps would you have two areas for vehicular access?
So that's a very good question. And so really right now, we're looking at around a 36,000 square foot facility to have all three levels of care. And really we want to work with the city and with the commission on what the best fit in that area would be. So it could be a one-story building, which would limit the space in which we would put it. That would likely go on that larger plot, which has the Lakeview access, and at which point it would be beneficial for us to have two entrances, one for the urgent recovery care services, and then one for general outpatient services, so we may come in off of Knott's and off of Lakeview in that situation. If we do 2 stories, we could even go to the property, one of those smaller, not the one zoned, the one zoned residential that's smaller. We could also possibly go up there, but it's all a matter of parking, to be able to have enough parking around those.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
At this time, I'd like to ask if there's anyone else in the audience that would like to speak in favor of this item. Okay, seeing none. Is there anyone in the audience this evening that would like to speak in opposition? Okay. Please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
My name is Lindsay Veloster. I am a resident right behind the space that they would like to request to build this facility. I live on Benjamin Street. I've lived there for about 12 years, and I do have some concerns about repurposing this area from residential to commercial. As the property stands right now, they did mention that it's vacant, but that area is already highly congested with Perkins Road, with Lakeview being a 2-lane road. It has 4 entrances to the neighborhood Walmart, to Goodwill, to Atwoods, and actually 2 entrances to Goodwill. Or 2 entrances to Atwoods. So it is a high traffic area. There are times just trying to go to and from work where traffic is backed up a ways on Lakeview. It's hard to turn left coming out of Walmart to go home. And there are different times of the day where there's school traffic and school buses lined up all the way from Perkins Road to Lakeview. So that, the traffic is a concern. Also, I believe that Grand Lake is a much-needed service. It provides great care to citizens who desperately need mental health, but I think that there could be other options considered in our city that would be a better location for this. This would be the only facility of its kind in this area. If somebody needed to go to the hospital, it's going to take 20 minutes or 10, 15 minutes to get there. I think that there could be other options that are considered. There's a space available on 6th Street by the IQ car wash that is commercial zoned, not quite 36,000 feet. I think it was 25,000 something feet. And the empty property, the FIFO furniture store. So I don't know if that area had been considered, but that would be closer to the hospital and the medical community, or at least provide easier access. As somebody who lives alone and has been in that neighborhood for 12 years, I think it's a safety concern too, what it introduces to our neighborhood potentially with that facility. I don't know that, but that is something that is concerning to me, as I just like the green space as well. So I'd like that to be considered, please.
Would you mind giving us your exact address, please?
Sure, it's 2021 North Benjamin Street. Thank you.
Is there anyone else this evening that would like to speak in opposition? Okay. Seeing none, we will close the public hearing and ask for staff to return.
So I can read through the alternatives and answer any other questions you might
Yes.
have. Okay. You can accept the findings and recommend that the city council approve the proposed specific use permit as presented. You can accept the findings and recommend that the city council approve the proposed specific use with conditions, noting what the conditions are. Find that the specific use permit is not as appropriate use for this property based on the impacts of the surrounding vicinity, and do not recommend that the city council approve the request, or find that additional information or discussion is needed prior to making a recommendation and table the request to a date certain. And with that, I'll ask if you have any questions.
Yeah. The way it's zoned now, it could be homes similar to the neighborhood to the east, right?
Yeah, it could be, with RTM, it could be apartments as well.
Okay.
That's what our future land use shows to, high density residential, so tall apartments.
So it would be speculation, but I don't know how that would compare if it got built out as it's zoned from a traffic perspective. Would it be better or worse than the facility that's being proposed?
I would think that, off the top of my cuff, I would say that it would be less traffic than a higher density residential.
Yeah, I was thinking the same. I also was curious if there's a barrier, any sort of physical barrier to the west of those houses on Benjamin. I don't know. I just didn't. Fencing or something that exists today, or if there would be.
Are you talking about so you're just saying like a natural barrier as it sits today, or what the applicant might be able to build?
Yeah, if there's not a natural one today, what would?
Yeah, they would need to follow all of our codes for screening and barriers. One example of this SUP, I shared this this morning, but for a similar use would be like Wings of Hope. It went into an RSS area, so even more restrictive zoning, and for a similar type health facility. And of course, it's another huge organization for our community. And Wings of Hope has the beautiful wall and screening, and I think we'd see some of the same thing for they're concerned about their own clients as well,
Right.
and the neighborhood around them.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I know there used to be a requirement in this, I may be going back too far in years, but there used to be a requirement between a commercial and a residential that we had to have like a 6-foot high screen of some sort. Is that still?
Yes, I don't know the
place.
exact details, but there is, yeah, percentages based on screening and height of fences or bushes.
Okay.
Yep, all those things will have to follow code when they come for their building permit.
Right.
So could I ask, so there will be a lot of other stages over the next few years, and you mentioned one is a building permit, so
Mhm.
they'll have to be, they would need to submit the plans for this structure and go through a process hearing and, okay.
Mhm.
That would all start with the city and,
Once the specific use is approved, or if you all approve it and council approves it, that SUP attaches to that land with the applicant and the use that that our code allows, which is a health facility like this. So if any of that changes, it has to come back through the process. Then to my understanding, the next step would be, if it does approve, that they would then work with their engineering, their architect, draw up the plans. That would have to come through development services and as an administrative process for approval to meet all the codes. It necessarily wouldn't come back for a hearing, if Ms. Childs agrees with that.
Because the property's gonna have to be platted. I mean, it's just plain land now, so it'll go through the preliminary and final plat process.
Okay, good. So they will see it again.
Yeah.
Good.
Infrastructure is typically a function of the platting process, and so all of those sorts of things, and it appears as if the applicant's paying very close attention to some of the concerns of the Planning Commission, and so the hope would be that they, and also the residents, that they would incorporate a lot of those suggestions into the plat as designed.
Any other questions, staff? No? All right, thank you. Anyone entertaining a motion or a little discussion on the item?
just for discussion, this organization is a big benefit to Stillwater and meets a need, and this seems like a logical progression in the development of their provision of services. The location has commercial and high density. This planned use seems to be similar, or at least as far as traffic and utilities and fitting into the community, would be beneficial. If it were not this type of development, it could be apartment buildings, it could be another commercial. This proposed use of it seems to be very, very beneficial without a lot of detractions to it. In fact, I don't see any detractions to this type of a development for this area.
I would agree with you as far as if there were to be apartments going back here, you would have 2-story and probably less visual privacy for those backyards. Really, with RTM zoning back in there, so the CS could conceivably provide a little bit more privacy with the screening that would be required for the separation between the two zonings.
Well, once with the SUP, for what I understand, it can't be used for anything else. There can be no other high density put in here. That is the only use that's allowed. If this organization is going to the trouble to get that SUP and do this development, they're not going to be coming back for other types of uses, so it's pretty much dedicated to this 13 and a half acres with a 36,000 square foot. That's a lot of open space. That it can't be changed unless the SUP is changed.
Yeah, I agree with both the commissioner and the chair. I think it'll be a great asset to the community, and I think there's enough tools in the toolbox, as they say, to integrate the facility adequately into the neighborhood so it won't be a issue. Okay, I move that we accept the findings and recommend that the city council approve the proposed specific use permit as presented.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. We shall now vote. Motion passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda would be presentation by special counsel, the city attorney's office, regarding state statutes, the Stillwater Code of Ordinances, the zoning code, and cases of interest on planning and zoning matters. With that, I'll turn it over.
Thank you. The city attorney and representatives of Development Service and I began talking about sort of an educational component for all of the boards and commissions and actually the city council. And so we did do some training before. I'm going to do my very best to hold this just to a couple of minutes. But what I thought I would do, and please know that I really want some feedback on this because I don't want you all to dread it and are sitting there going, oh my gosh, make her stop talking. But what I thought I would do is I have some professional colleagues that are actually on the other side of what we do, and they represent developers primarily in the Tulsa area. And what they did for me is I strong-armed them, and they actually gave me a list of about 100 cases. And so when you're sort of a planning and zoning nerd like I am, you get very excited about those kinds of lists because then you can kind of start working your way through those cases. So I was trying to come up with something a little bit more interesting as we talk through tonight. But the case that I want to tell you about tonight was a case by the name of Lynch versus Oklahoma City. And I really enjoy kind of delving a little bit into the details on these planning and zoning cases because each one of them involved people and aspirations and land ownership. But prior to 1981, there were two sisters, Rita Lynch and Helen Hill, and they had been raised in a residence at 3523 North Classen. And so if you're familiar with the Northwest Classen area, you know, I'm sure some of you have driven up through that area. It really can be heavily residential outside of the commercial development area. Well, they'd had a lot of problem with vandalism, and so they had decided to tear down their childhood home. Immediately next door to this was a commercial area. It was a strip center. And so the owner of the strip center, he had volunteered to purchase the land for them if they could get it rezoned to commercial. So they went to the city and they went through the process and they said, hey, look, we got this residential area right here. There is an office use on the other side, and then across the street there was also commercial development. And so they took it to the city, and the city denied the rezoning request. They wanted to move it from residential to commercial. Well, what was interesting about this was in that area, the Crown Heights area, and this was actually located within the Putnam Heights subdivision, and they have very, very active homeowners associations. And if you drive back through some of those neighborhoods, you'll see they're very well maintained. I mean, people take a great pride in their residences, and they work very diligently to keep them up. And so, as you might imagine, the homeowners just went crazy over this, and so they decided to file an action to intervene in so they could have their voices heard before the court. So what was interesting about this is it went before the district court, and he heard testimony from all sides. And at the end of the hearing, he decided, well, and one thing that I do think that is important about this is the city really had to concede that residential development on that particular parcel wasn't reasonable because it was surrounded by commercial all the way around. And it's not like this was a residential parcel that was located within the neighborhood. It was right next door to a commercial shopping center. But the city was listening to the residents and was really advocating for a use that was just slightly less than the strip center. So it was a little bit interesting because the court really did try to fashion a remedy. He listened to all the testimony and reviewed all the briefs, and when he came back, he said, okay, well, what I'm going to do, and of course I'm paraphrasing, but what he said was, I am going to allow this area to be rezoned to the commercial, but I'm going to put some restrictions on it. And so he did that in a way to sort of placate the neighborhood and the city. So it went up on appeal, and the appeals court didn't feel quite as warmly about the efforts of the court. What the Court of Appeals said was, in some instances, we're going to allow judges to rezone property. We're going to give them the ability to do that. But the only time we're going to let you do that, judges, is when there's really no other logical zoning that can be applied. But in this case, the Court of Appeals said there are lots of uses that could go here. It could be a higher density residential, or it could be office, or it could be something less than the use that they're requesting, basically. And so they came back in and they said, it was something that they had reiterated before. They said it's the function of the city to rezone property when there are some things that are still up for discussion. We're only going to let judges zone property when there's only one reasonable outcome. So anyway, I just thought that was kind of an interesting case, and it was such a good reminder as the Planning Commission to, do like you all do and listen to what people have to say, but, do be thoughtful and keep in mind the surrounding uses and try not to do something that is really going to back the court into getting to make the decision. So.
Thank you. It's a great reminder. I won't speak for the rest of the commission, but I will look forward to having some educational opportunities in the future so that we can ask some questions and perhaps feel a little bit more prepared up here. So I do appreciate that. Okay. Next item on the agenda is miscellaneous items from staff, planning commissioners, or the city attorney for discussion and possible action. The only item listed on the agenda is that the next planning commission meeting will be April 5th. And do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Without objection, move to adjourn.
Second that.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. We'll now vote. Motion passes 5-0. We are now adjourned.